So the first success story I want to talk about is this analysis summary sentence generator. And it might sound a little bit silly to just generate one sentence at a time, but in this case, I had a pretty large assembly, maybe 100 or 150 parts. And for my analysis report, I needed for each part, this sentence, this part number has a maximum stress of this in this particular output set at this element ID, and this is its temperature. And so I did this a couple of times, clicking through in the Femap interface, and that got really old really fast. So I just wrote a really short program to help me to do that. And that pretty much took, 5 minutes of clicking around in Femap and turned it into just a quick copy and paste from the Femap message window. So overall, this saved me a lot of time throughout developing this analysis report. Next up is importing material properties from Excel. So in a variety of projects we've come across, the customer has their material properties in Excel. Someone went into some materials documentation like MMPDS and pulled it out into a spreadsheet. And now they want to get it into Femap so their analysts can use it. So what you can do with API is have the API import all your material properties from Excel and create a Femap material library, and pair that with a startup script that makes sure that that material library is loaded whenever you start up Femap. So this kind of puts all the work up front, and now the analysts themselves don't have to dig around in MMPDS or dig around in different spreadsheets. All the material properties are right there in Femap for them to use. Next up is point load distribution. So in this case, the customer's best practice was to distribute point loads over an area rather than just creating a load on a single node. So this API would allow the analyst to select the central node and create a distributed load around that central node. And this saved a fair bit of time for the engineers, but it also reduced human error a lot. With engineers making a mistake and maybe they forget to make that distributed load, and now you have a point load with all these unrealistic stresses. So this made things a lot easier for them. Next up is this combined loads analysis. So like Pedro was saying, you might need to combine different sources of stresses in your model. For this case, we had a whole bunch of transient thermal stresses. We also had random vibration stresses and that kind of thing. And so this customer had this enormous spreadsheet that they were using to calculate their margins of safety based on the combinations of these stresses. In their original process, the engineer would need to go through and look at each of those thermal transient time steps to determine which time steps they wanted to look at in their giant Excel document. So out of maybe 200 time steps, the analyst would pick 5. And that relied a lot on the ability of the human engineer to determine what the critical time steps were going to be. But by automating this process, we were able to do away with the spreadsheet entirely so that engineers could create contour plots of the margin of safety in Femap, as well as determine what the critical thermal output set was, which means that they could look at all of the thermal cases instead of just 5 or 6 out of a couple hundred. So overall, this saved our engineers about 8 hours of time. And this was huge because we did this several times. The customer had sort of an iterative process going on. So this wasn't just, it saved one engineer 8 hours of time. It saved 4 engineers each 8 hours of time for each iteration of this project. So this ended up being a huge time saver for the engineers that were working on this project. Next up are a couple of Saratech success stories. First off is Durapost, and Durapost is a fatigue analysis add-on to Femap. It's built using the Femap API, and it allows users to assess your fatigue results directly in Femap. Unlike some of the previous examples, this is just a general purpose product. So you might have an API that's very specific to your processes, or you might have a more general API that applies to a broader audience. So the goal of Durapost is to save your users time and get you that return on investment in a very short time. Similarly, Aeropost is a Femap add-on that manages aeroelastic loads from Nastran. Again, this one is focused on saving time and getting you that ROI as soon as possible.
Thanks for checking out our channel. If you like what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe down below so you don't miss out on any new videos. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest engineering news and information. And to see all of our upcoming events, please visit our website at saratech.com/events.